It's about time. Time to show you 3 undeniable reasons why the retro gaming scene in Belgium is on another level. Those reasons? The best game stores in Brussels, Olskool Games, Pele-Mele, and Super Gaby Games. This is going to be a long journey where I'll take you through every single shelf in these stores, and I mean every shelf. Because if there's one thing I've noticed, it's that Belgian collectors don't leave anything out of their collections. Buckle up. We're going retro game hunting in Brussels. Olskool Games was the first retro game store I visited, and trust me, you can't just walk past that storefront without stopping, but it's not just the look of the place that leaves a great first impression. I've got to mention the customer service. The owner, Sam, is an absolute legend. Not only did he give me the green light to film, but he even encouraged me to capture rare retro games and offered to help by taking some of his treasures out of the display case to get the best lighting. It was a really refreshing change because, as much as I fell in love with retro game hunting in Asia, it's just so packed with tourists that customer service doesn't always feel as personal. Here, I finally got to have a relaxed conversation in English and ask about the best deals without feeling rushed. One thing that really caught me off guard in Brussels retro game stores was the incredible variety of games and systems. At Olskool Games, it was almost impossible to focus on just one display case because something interesting kept catching my eye in the next one. My advice? Take at least 2 or 3 laps around the store. First, get a general feel for the place and then dive deeper into the specific retro games that catch your attention. What's great is that the store doesn't lack rare collector's editions, whether it's consoles or those big box game releases. Plus, there's a ton of accessories for Sony and Nintendo consoles, from controller splitters to cables and racing wheels. You can tell that Sam is a huge fighting game fan too because there's a substantial collection of arcade sticks on display. One of them really caught my eye. Honestly, from floor to ceiling, the entire store is packed with a genuine love for retro gaming. The store isn't just filled with the best retro games, they've also put a lot of effort into the display to give it a bit of a museum-like vibe. Right in the middle, you'll find a massive Master Chief statue from the Halo series, setting the tone for just how epic this place is. Besides games, there's plenty for collectors and fans of gamer room decor. My eyes even caught a few Lego sets, mostly Mario-themed ones. You know, if you came in with a €100 budget for games and only spent €90, I'm pretty sure Sam wouldn't mind if you used that last €10 to pick up a cool figurine. That way, you'd have an awesome little souvenir from Belgium to put on your shelf. With so many retro games packed onto the shelves, it was tough to get a precise read on the prices. Luckily, most of them were labeled, so if you spot a title you're interested in, you can judge for yourself whether the prices differ from what you'd see in your own country. Of course, you'll find some rare limited editions priced in the triple digits, and don't even get me started on the Neo Geo collection. Still, I'd say the prices follow global trends pretty closely. Let's be real. You're not going to find Rule of Rose for just a few bucks anywhere these days. On the flip side, there are plenty of opportunities to score cheaper games too, like used titles for modern consoles, or loose retro cartridges for the Game Boy without boxes or manuals. So while Olskool Games definitely caters to hardcore collectors, it also has some great deals for those who prioritize playing the games over keeping them boxed and pristine. A little something for everyone. Lately, I've become really interested in European equivalents of limited-run games. I've been following niche distributors that release physical editions of games for modern consoles like PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch, as well as homebrew titles for older systems. My favorite publisher of this kind is VGNY from New York, but in Europe the most popular ones are Red Art Games and Pixel Heart. Both of these studios are based in France, so to be honest, I didn't really expect to find their games in Brussels, but I was pleasantly surprised. It turns out that most retro game stores here actually collaborate with these distributors, and I kept coming across limited editions, like Okinawa Rush, with that stunning red steelbook. It was such a pleasant surprise to see that you can still find games that might have slipped through your fingers when they were available online, often still sealed in their original factory wrap. It's a comforting thought, especially considering that the era of physical games is slowly but surely coming to an end. These might be the final moments to enjoy the tactile experience of holding a freshly sealed game box in your hands, so take the chance while you still can. The store also features a shelf dedicated to Blu-ray movies. While it's not a huge selection, it might just hint at an interesting new direction for retro game shops. Physical movie releases are disappearing from supermarkets at an increasingly rapid pace, yet there's still demand for them among collectors. And it's not just collectors who are interested. Plenty of people still want to own a legitimate copy of their favorite movie, just in case streaming services like Netflix decide to remove it from their library. Let's be honest, that's probably happened to all of us at some point. Owning a physical copy gives you peace of mind, knowing that your favorite film isn't going to vanish overnight. You've probably noticed the sheer size of some of the games on display. Sometimes they come in massive boxes, which might make you think twice about buying them if you flew to Belgium. But don't worry, I've got good news. You can definitely work something out with Sam regarding shipping. He's more than happy to pack your games securely in sturdy boxes with plenty of bubble wrap and send them straight to your address. Just make sure to check the shipping options from Belgium and see whether apps like Vinted are synchronized in your country. The owner's openness toward tourists is a major plus for this store, making it a great spot even for international retro hunters. Earlier, I mentioned European equivalents of limited-run games releases, but you can actually find original LRG editions here too. Keep in mind that European stores have to cover the import costs from the United States, so the prices won't match the original listings. Still, it's a fair trade-off. You don't have to deal with long shipping times, and you can be sure the game is in perfect condition. Before visiting retro game stores in Belgium, I encourage you to think about your shopping strategy regarding one important aspect. Most of the games you'll find in Brussels are French releases, and quite a few also come with German language covers. I once gave some thought to what this means for me as a game collector. At some point, I decided that the most important editions for my collection are those in English, Japanese, and Polish. The last one being sentimental because it's my native language. As a result, I usually pass on French editions, even if the game interests me and is in mint condition. When filling your shelves with various games, it's worth establishing some criteria about which titles you actually want to keep so that your collection doesn't become just a chaotic assortment but rather a curated collection. Of course, if having individual game releases in languages other than your native one or English doesn't bother you, go for it. In Brussels, I came across some great PS1 games at lower prices specifically because their manuals were in less popular languages. It's definitely a way to save some money. Personally, I do have a few titles in my collection in German, Italian, or even Korean. Olskool Games reminded me why I love retro game hunting so much. You see, modern digital game distribution is undoubtedly convenient, but it also makes us meet up less and less as gamers. I'm not just talking about couch co-op sessions, but also those simple trips to a game store or supermarket to check out the latest releases, judge them by the cover, and try to convince your parents to part with a bit of their paycheck to make your dream of owning that favorite title come true. In short, technology has made shopping easier while taking away real-life connections. At Olskool Games, I must have spent over an hour, and during that time, dozens of passionate gamers came and went. Guys and girls showed up in groups, gathering around different display cases. Some hung out by the Nintendo section, others at Sony, while a few were there to trade an Xbox game. I can't recall a single moment of silence in the store, and while I usually appreciate peace and quiet, I was genuinely happy to see so many people there. It's an opportunity to play games from the displays together, deepen your knowledge about collecting, and, most importantly, feel like you're not alone in your passion. I'm curious, what's your strategy when it comes to collecting games for different systems? Do you aim to have everything CIB complete in box, or are you okay with loose cartridges without boxes and manuals? I'm asking because sometimes I feel like picking up a new Game Boy game, but since it's not a system I grew up with, I just can't justify spending triple-digit amounts in euros on a single title. That kind of budget is reserved for games I'm way more nostalgic about, like those on the original PlayStation. So I'm considering a hybrid strategy, aiming for completeness with systems I feel sentimental about, like PlayStation and big box PC games, but being more flexible with systems I'm just discovering for the first time. Let me know in the comments how you approach your collection. Collectors often steer clear of the Xbox, but take a look at the cool console variants on display at Olskool Games. It's nice to see the system getting some love, especially since I barely saw any Xbox consoles while hunting in Asia. Europe, on the other hand, has a much closer connection with it. This display case is the owner's pride and joy, Neo Geo. If you own this many games for the system, you either started collecting ridiculously early or robbed a bank. I remember checking Neo Geo prices in Tokyo, and they often hit 4-digit sums. I didn't even bother asking the owner how much his copies were worth. My girlfriend sometimes watches these videos, and I'd rather keep the narrative that retro games can be affordable. Besides Neo Geo games, you'll also find tons of accessories and peripherals here. Honestly, I've never seen such an impressive Neo Geo collection anywhere else in Europe. Major respect to the owner for putting this together. I have to mention something really important about the retro gaming scene in Belgium. Okay, now you see Game Boy Advance and original Game Boy games. Nothing special, every retro shop has those, but what truly stands out and deserves praise is the Belgian collector's passion for PC games. I never expected to find so many PC big box editions in Brussels. I walked out of the store with a Namco arcade stick for the PlayStation 1 in perfect condition. I can't wait to play Tekken 3 and Soul Edge on it. I also picked up 2 games, Porsche Challenge and Virtual Pool. Don't judge, I've got a soft spot for less mainstream titles. Brussels is like the European Tokyo. Just 5 minutes from a big retro game store, you'll find another one. But not just for games. Pele-Mele is a paradise for fans of books, music, figurines, toys, and even collectors of model trains. The selection is massive, and you don't have to limit yourself to just retro games. Even if you decide to focus only on games at Pele-Mele, make sure to set aside plenty of time. There's so much to browse. The store's entrance might seem unassuming, with its PlayStation 4 Blue and Nintendo Switch Red, but with every step, I kept stumbling upon retro treasures from all sorts of classic systems. The store was bustling with activity, and you should know that shopping here is a very formal and traditional experience. Items are kept behind glass displays, and if something catches your eye, you need to ask one of the staff members to unlock the cabinet and hand you the game, vinyl record, or toy you're interested in. I was particularly drawn to the Power Rangers toys. I have a huge soft spot for Mighty Morphin, and I started wondering if I should buy one of the Rangers for my daughter. At least officially the toy would be for her, but let's be honest, I'd be fulfilling a childhood dream of having as many of these figures as possible. The shop has the vibe of an antique store, which I really appreciate. Every now and then, I enjoy visiting numismatic shops, and the atmosphere here felt quite similar. The store, true to form, also stocked big box PC games, which absolutely delighted my collector's soul. On top of that, you could find an incredible variety of collector's editions for almost every platform: Castlevania, Dark Souls, you name it. By the time I got to Pele-Mele, I was already overwhelmed by the sheer number of amazing games at Olskool Games. It felt like going out for dinner after devouring a massive steak. And you know what? In Brussels, your appetite for retro only grows the more you indulge. Ah, that beautiful black spine of PlayStation 1 games. It's clear that Belgians hold this generation close to their hearts, and I noticed a few titles from my wish list at really good prices. Beyblade and Rapid Racer, for example. I asked the clerk to take them out of the display case to check the packaging language, but unfortunately they were French releases. Since I stick to my collecting criteria, I decided to pass on them, even though the prices were really tempting. However, if you don't mind non-English releases, you can score some great deals here. I'm pleasantly surprised by how many complete in-box games are available here. Some cardboard boxes have minor creases, but if a game is damaged or missing something, it's clearly labeled with a yellow note. I appreciate this attention to detail, especially since this isn't a dedicated game store. Yet the staff still put in the effort to present everything as accurately as possible. This store also knows how to make a great display for Game Boy cartridges. You can easily see all the game covers along with their prices. By the way, if you're ever wondering how to make a nice showcase for loose Game Boy carts, I highly recommend using nail polish organizers. You can thank me later. At Pele-Mele, you can also buy popular titles for the latest consoles, like PlayStation 5. These aren't kept behind glass cases. Instead, you'll find thin plastic placeholders with the game title on the shelves, while the actual discs are stored securely. Well, I definitely don't come to places like this for new games, but it's nice to see that they also cater to fans of the current generation. I started wondering if Belgians might be huge fans of Catherine. I saw it in almost every store, and usually there wasn't just one copy. If you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic game. Belgian retro gamers must really love Sega consoles. Almost every game store I visited had an impressive collection of Dreamcast, Game Gear, Saturn, and Mega Drive games. As I mentioned before, Pele-Mele loves selling literature, and it's no different when it comes to gaming. The store had popular books and local magazines for gamers. store had quite a rich selection of games for the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Wii U. Just like in Olskool Games, they also had plenty of accessories, including boxed light guns. Just like Olskool Games offers Blu-ray movies, Pele-Mele sells films on VHS tapes. It's a great way to preserve original works in their unaltered form, without the risk of your streaming platform removing scenes from your favorite animated series or movies. Take a moment to check if your favorite films are still available anywhere. If not, it might be a sign that it's time to pick them up on a physical format. For a while now, I had been thinking about picking up the collector's edition of Okinawa Rush from Pixel Heart's website. I'm a big fan of how the cover and steelbook look, and Pele-Mele had a really attractive price for it, so I couldn't resist. On top of that, I also decided to grab a Power Rangers figure. Of course, it was for my beloved daughter, who was absolutely thrilled with it. Looks like I might have to get a Megazord to complete the set. And here we are, the grand finale of my Belgian retro gaming adventure. Super Gaby Games is a hugely popular store for game collectors, Japanese snack enthusiasts, and figure hunters. In short, a geek's paradise. I found some truly unique accessories here, things I hadn't come across anywhere else. It was also the first time I saw graded sealed games in a physical store, which shows that they're keeping up with modern collecting trends. Another big plus? The customer service. The staff had absolutely no issues with my camera, were incredibly helpful, and showed great patience with my habit of circling the store 100 times, asking tons of questions, and then leaving with just 2 games. I really appreciate that. Just like at Olskool Games, I felt comfortable here, like I was part of a larger, welcoming community. Just like with the other stores, I got the feeling that there isn't a single system Super Gaby Games doesn't have games for. As befits Belgium's retro gaming kingdom, the store is packed to the brim with content. Consoles, light guns, arcade sticks, racing wheels, cases, keychains, plushies, controllers, you name it. I also really liked that the store had a lot of cool merch and decorative items for a gaming room, like framed game artworks to hang on the wall. The store maintained the high standard set by the previous shops. Nearly every game had a price sticker along with a detailed description if any elements were missing. A huge plus was that the stickers also included information about the game's language version. This eliminated the need to constantly ask the staff whether a game was in English. For example, at Pele-Mele, all 3 games I asked about had to be taken out of the display case by the seller, only for me to find out they were French versions, which, as I mentioned, aren't really my thing, so I had to leave them at the counter. Super Gaby Games clearly put thought into this and made a real effort to provide precise product descriptions. I already mentioned that Catherine is a frequent guest in the glass display cases of Belgian game stores, but it's worth noting that the Castlevania series is just as common. Gamers in Brussels clearly know what's good, and the sellers are simply making smart choices to meet the demand. The store had a pretty solid selection of games for the original Xbox. There were also various collector's editions, which was a nice surprise. Xbox isn't usually the first choice for game collectors, but here, there was an impressive lineup of titles for Microsoft's console. It was no different with the PlayStation game library. The display case featuring PlayStation 2 titles was adorned with Crash Nitro Kart. Do you agree that this series is the best Mario Kart clone? Rule of Rose is the kind of game you'd rather not show your girlfriend the price of. It costs as much as a nice weekend getaway to an exotic destination, hotel included. Well, there was quite a stir in Europe some time ago when it turned out that one, I believe Italian, store had a surprising number of factory-sealed copies in stock. It's one of the most sought-after PS2 collector's titles. I remember once finding Castlevania on an auction site. The seller claimed there was no point in even opening the box because at this point it was basically an investment, something like a store of value. What do you think will be worth more in 20 years? Bitcoin or a mint condition copy of Castlevania on PlayStation? That's something I really appreciated. The store had a great selection of imported Japanese games. I'm a big fan of these, especially on PlayStation 1, because when I was a kid, my dad used to buy me games in Japanese. You could say I learned the basics of the language by playing Digimon Rumble Arena and Winning 11. That's why I have such a strong sentimental attachment to NTSCJ titles. Lately, I've also been expanding my Japanese Game Boy Advance collection. Their cardboard boxes look completely different from their American or European counterparts, and you can often find releases that never made it to the West, some of which don't even have fan translations available online. I really need to stick to my plan and start learning Japanese, so I can enjoy more story-driven games instead of just action titles. However, at Super Gaby Games, I wanted to switch things up and leave with a European PAL game for a change. My eyes were drawn to Vib Ribbon, sealed copy of Strikers 1945, and Abe's Odyssey, the legendary game I spent countless hours playing with my dad as a kid. But since this was the last store on my list, and my budget was running low after my previous stops, I had to be a bit more selective. Being reasonable is tough when you step into an amazing retro game store, you know. Lately, I've been on the hunt for a good case for my Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. I occasionally see listings on eBay and local auction sites, but I'm never quite sure about the quality or authenticity of the items. That's why I was pleasantly surprised to find so many interesting storage cases and organizers for Nintendo handhelds at Super Gaby Games. That said, I ultimately decided to pass on buying one. While some organizers had a definite wow factor, they were too large to be practical. As for the original 90s cases, they looked great but were a bit too flashy in terms of color. Still, I highly recommend checking out Super Gaby Games' selection, not just for games, but also for officially licensed Nintendo accessories from 20 to 30 years ago. Not every store can boast such an impressive retro collection. The Nintendo Games display is not only beautiful but also well organized. As I mentioned earlier, everything is clearly labeled, including prices and language versions. Plus, the games come with protective cases, ensuring they stay in great condition. Big respect to the owner and staff for not making customers dig through everything manually or constantly ask for details. It really streamlines the wallet-draining process. And if you do need to ask something, rest assured, the staff is incredibly helpful. I can be a pretty demanding customer, often asking a ton of questions. Yet the employee was smiling and assisting me right away, even though I'm sure he had plenty to do. I mentioned Japanese releases earlier, and Super Gaby Games had a few of them for the Game Boy as well. In the same display case, you could also spot games for the Famicom Disk System, which is definitely worth praising. Seeing Famicom Disk System games in a European store is quite rare, so it was a pleasant surprise. And amidst all this retro goodness, there's also a touch of modern freshness. Well, let's call it retro-inspired freshness. The store sells products from 8-Bit Do, a brand well known to retro gaming enthusiasts. You can find their beautiful retro keyboards inspired by old Nintendo consoles, as well as controllers and arcade sticks. I've got my eye on an arcade stick for playing on Switch and PC. It's compact, wireless, and let's be honest, absolutely gorgeous. However, I'm even more tempted by a custom design with silent buttons, so I don't drive my neighbors crazy with constant clicking during my late-night fighting game sessions. If you know any good places in Europe where someone custom builds arcade sticks with high-quality Sanwa buttons and joysticks, let me know in the comments. If you're looking to buy something uniquely Belgian while in Belgium, then you should definitely pick up a game based on the Smurfs. The Smurfs is a Belgian animated series that many European adults grew up watching. It's a true piece of pop culture nostalgia, and what better place to grab a Smurfs game than in its country of origin? What makes this store stand out from others is the large selection of imported snacks from Japan and the United States. From a business perspective, this is a great way to upsell complementary products alongside games, and I have to admit, it totally worked on me. After picking up some games, I couldn't resist grabbing a Psyduck-themed drink when I got thirsty after an hour of exploring the store. Super Gaby Games keeps its biggest treasures right in the center of the store, just behind the checkout counter. There, you'll find glass display cases filled with incredible collectibles, Game & Watch handhelds, mini arcade games featuring Popeye, Pokemon cards, and much more. You'll also spot arcade machines, perfect for immersing yourself in the gaming world and taking a break from everyday worries. Plus, I highly recommend checking out the art prints from classic games, which can add a unique touch to any gaming setup. I'm currently in the process of buying an apartment, and as I plan its layout, I can't help but think that these prints would bring some serious personality to those plain white walls. I've noticed that both France and Belgium have a deep love for collecting Neo Geo games and accessories. I assume this comes from a strong nostalgia for arcade games, and perhaps the local gaming culture has always been heavily influenced by them. It's no coincidence that almost every store I visited had tons of arcade sticks, and a great selection of beat-em-ups and fighting games. I also spotted that Pixel Heart, a French indie game publisher, frequently releases homebrew titles for the Neo Geo. It's fascinating to see how the arcade gaming scene is still thriving in these two countries, keeping the Neo Geo legacy alive. And as I mentioned before, tons of awesome geek merch. From keychains to premium hoodies, this store has it all. I really appreciate this because while it's a paradise for hardcore retro collectors, it's also a great spot for more casual customers who aren't necessarily into collecting games themselves. You can simply be a fan of a franchise like Sonic and walk out with a figure, a pin, a poster, or a plushie without needing to buy an actual game. I really like this approach. It makes the store welcoming for all kinds of gaming fans. Another store once again proves Belgium's deep love for Sega. Games, consoles, and accessories from this legendary brand dominate the prime display cases. It's incredible to see just how much space is dedicated to Sega in Belgian retro game stores. It's almost like stepping into an alternate timeline where Sega won the console wars. Once again, I was tempted by Pixel Heart's collector's editions of indie games. The store employee confirmed that the shop collaborates with Pixel Heart, meaning you can often find sealed copies of games that are no longer available on the distributor's website. After picking up Okinawa Rush, I was craving another shoot 'em up and, lucky me, I found exactly what I was looking for. Belgium once again stole my heart with a beautiful display case full of big box PC games. I was seriously tempted to grab a copy of Driver for PC, but I had to pass since it was missing the manual. A bit of a heartbreak, especially because the box itself was in pristine condition. Blade Runner also caught my eye, but in the end, I decided to allocate my budget elsewhere. Here's a display case filled with blister-packed Game Boy and Pokemon collectibles. I probably don't need to tell the hardcore collectors out there that seeing prices like 4,000 euros here isn't surprising at all, right? Similar price tags were all over Tokyo's retro game stores, especially for limited edition items. And here's something I rarely see in Europe: graded sealed games. This trend in game collecting is still in its early stages, so it's even more interesting to see graded copies available in a physical store. Some of these games had an American WATA certification, while others were graded by Germany's Pixel grading. It's fascinating how the philosophy of collecting is evolving. Retro gamers know there are thousands of ways to play old games without opening a factory-sealed copy. These graded games are treated like banknotes, not for use, but as pristine collectibles. The content becomes secondary because, let's be honest, you can always play a second copy. Meanwhile, the graded one sits proudly on display with a high rating. What do you think about game grading? Let me know in the comments. The store also had portable consoles I had never seen before, including the Microvision. This is exactly why I love retro game hunting. It's not just about nostalgia, but also about discovering and learning about gaming hardware I never had the chance to use. Every trip to a retro store is like a mini history lesson, and that's what makes it so exciting. At the back of the store, you'll find a display case filled with modern rare collector's editions. These often include limited releases from distributors like Pixel Heart, Red Art Games, and Limited Run Games. I'll be honest, as much as I love admiring these boxes, I always find myself facing a collector's dilemma. If you have a few dozen euros to spend on a game, is it better to invest in a classic title, one that has stood the test of time, or should you take a chance on a new indie game, hoping it becomes a future classic? In a moment, I'll show you what games I bought, but first I want to give a big shout out to the David Nates Show. A few years ago, he made a similar video about the best game stores in Belgium, and thanks to him, I was able to do some solid research without aimlessly wandering around Brussels. I'll list all the stores I visited in the video description, along with their social media links. I'm sure that if you add them to your Google Maps, you won't be disappointed, even if you end up not buying anything. This Vectrex collection is the perfect final touch that proves just how amazing Super Gaby Games is and how highly Belgium ranks when it comes to retro collecting. Top tier stuff. And here's a great example of the zero waste philosophy in action. Your damaged consoles don't have to go to waste. They can be repurposed as interior decor, like this clock. The store also had an entire display case filled with demo and promo versions of various games. I honestly regret selling some of my PlayStation 3 promo copies years ago. I won them in a tournament, and back then, these editions seemed a bit odd to me. Today they're considered rare collectibles. I had to say goodbye to the Pikachu case. In its own way, it was beautiful, original, and well-preserved, but ultimately, not my style. I left the store very happy, having added Abe's Odyssey for PlayStation 1 and Andro Dunos 2 for Nintendo Switch to my collection. Dear Belgian retro game store owners, you are awesome! Thank you for being passionate entrepreneurs in such a crazy and amazing industry.